At my sister's wedding, in front of all our relatives, my sister humiliated me. She looked at me with a proud smile and said loudly, "Oh, what car did you come in? Oh, wait, you don't even have one, right?" Everyone laughed. The sound of their laughter echoed inside me like a storm. My cheeks burned with shame, but I tried to smile. I looked at her calmly and replied, "Oh yes, and your husband, oh wait, he doesn't even have legs." Suddenly, the laughter died. The hall went silent. My sister's smile froze. Every eye in the room turned toward us. My mother gasped. My father lowered his head. My words had sliced through the air like a knife, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the laughter before. I walked out of that hall without looking back. The cold air outside touched my face, and I felt tears roll down. Not because I regretted what I said, but because of what led me there. That insult, that moment, was not born in a single day. It was a storm that had been building for years. My name is Elena Carter, and this is my story. I am 30 years old now, but the wounds I carry are much older than that. I was always the quiet one, the simple one, the one who never got what she deserved. My sister, Clara, was the shining star of the family, beautiful, confident, and cruel in ways no one ever noticed. Since childhood, I was the shadow behind her spotlight. When I studied hard, she got praised for her looks. When I achieved something, she made sure to do something louder, flashier, and more noticed. I never hated her, not at first, but love can slowly rot when it's never returned. When our parents divorced, I was 19 and Clara was 21. She stayed with Mom and I went with Dad. That was the first time I realized how divided our lives would be. Dad didn't have much. He worked as a mechanic fixing broken cars in a small garage on the edge of town. I used to help him after college, my hands greasy, my clothes smelling like oil. Clara used to visit sometimes just to mock me. "Still working with those dirty hands, huh?" she'd say. "Guess some people are born to stay small." I would smile and say nothing. But every time she left, I promised myself, one day, she'd understand what small really meant. Years passed. I finished college, but life didn't give me much. I struggled to find a stable job. I worked in small cafes, then as a receptionist, then as a freelance writer. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I learned to survive even when life wasn't kind. Clara, on the other hand, married rich. Her husband, Michael, was from an upper-class family. They lived in a mansion with marble floors and golden lights. She posted her life online, vacations, dinners, gifts, everything perfect. To the world, she was a queen. To me, she was a stranger wearing my sister's face. But behind those pictures, I knew her truth. Michael had lost his legs in a car accident 2 years after their marriage. He was in a wheelchair, and although she acted supportive online, she treated him like a burden. I heard from our aunt once that Clara barely stayed home and often complained that she was stuck with a broken man. That truth burned inside me, not because I wanted revenge, but because I couldn't believe how heartless she had become. Yet fate, as cruel as it is, gave me a chance to see her again at her wedding reception. Yes, her second marriage. She had divorced Michael quietly and found someone else, a businessman, rich and proud. When the invitation came, I hesitated. I didn't want to go, but Dad said softly, "You should, you're still her sister." So I went. I wore my simplest dress, the one I could afford, and took a cab to the venue. The hall was full of shining lights, crystal glasses, and rich perfumes. People were smiling, dancing, and whispering. And there she was, Clara, in her perfect white gown, looking like a princess from another world. When she saw me, her eyes sparkled with sarcasm. She came closer, hugged me lightly, and whispered, "You actually came. Didn't think you'd find the money for the ride." I smiled weakly and said, "You're right, but I thought family still meant something." She laughed. "Family? Oh, sweetheart, that's a poor word for poor people." And then came the moment, the insult that broke everything. "So, what car did you come in?" she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Oh, wait, you don't even have one, right?" Everyone around us laughed. I could see the waiter covering his mouth, trying not to. My hands trembled. My heart pounded. And something inside me, the quiet, patient part that had stayed silent all my life, finally broke. "Oh, yes," I said softly. And your husband, oh wait, he doesn't even have legs. The silence that followed was pure, deep, beautiful, like justice finally breathing. I turned and left. Outside, I felt the cool air again, but this time it didn't sting. It healed. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel weak. I felt like I had finally taken back the piece of dignity she had stolen from me for years. But that was just the beginning. The world doesn't let you escape after you hit back, especially not when your enemy is your own blood. A week later, I started getting messages. People sent me screenshots of Clara's posts. She wrote about me online, calling me jealous, broken, bitter. She wrote that I mocked her husband's disability. She turned everyone against me. And once again, I became the villain of her story. But this time, I didn't stay silent. I decided, if she wanted war, I'd give her one, a war she could never win. I stayed quiet for a day, listening to the noise around me, the messages, the whispers, the looks from people who used to smile. I felt anger and a cold clarity. I realized anger alone would not win this. I needed a plan. I needed to show the world who Clara really was, but I also needed to be smarter than her. She had money, friends, and the skill to twist any story to her favor. I had truth, memory, and something she had forgotten, other people's quiet hearts. First, I took a step back from emotion and watched. I watched Clara's social accounts, the people who liked her posts, the places she visited, and the friends who always clapped the loudest. I started to collect things she thought were private old messages she sent to friends, the calls she ignored, the careless comments when she thought nobody was listening. I did not steal or hack anything. I paid attention. I kept receipts of the years of small cruelties she had shown me and others. I wrote them down, calmly, like a journalist preparing a story. My notes were not for gossip, they were for proof. Then I reached out to people she had hurt. I messaged our aunt, the one who once told me about Michael, and I asked simple questions. Not accusations, just memory. Do you remember when Clara said? I spoke with neighbors who had seen Clara leave Michael alone for days. I talked to old classmates who had been made fun of by her in college. Most were afraid to speak at first. They had learned long ago that defending yourself against Clara meant becoming her enemy. But when I listened without judgment, some started to open up, not in angry bursts but in tired, honest sentences. She did this, they said. She laughed at my problems. Those small confessions began to form a pattern of selfishness disguised as glamour. My plan was not to ruin Clara in a single moment. I wanted to carefully remove the lacquer she had painted over herself. People were used to seeing her shine. I would show the cracks beneath. I started with small, true things she could not argue with. I posted a memory from our childhood, something small and private that only family would recognize. A photo of us at 19, messy hair, paint on our clothes, laughing together while Dad fixed the car in the driveway. The caption was honest and quiet. We were poor once. We are still the same girls inside. I did not call her out. I let the image speak. People reacted not with the cruel clapping she loved, but with warm, surprised comments. Some remembered being that poor once too. The post went slow and steady. It did not need fireworks. Clara responded, of course. She wrote a post that sounded polished and dignified. She said she was proud of how far she had come, how resilience and hard work had made her life better. The post was full of glossy pictures of her new home and tasteless aphorisms about success. She made sure to mention family and love in the same sentence, trying to look gentle. Her team of friends liked and shared immediately. I watched the numbers climb and felt a small sting, but I did not reply. My next move would be quieter and smarter. I volunteered at a local rehab center. I wanted to meet people who lived the life Clara treated like an inconvenience. I worked my shifts. I sat and listened to stories of courage and loss. The center taught mechanical therapy, physical rehab, and honest human patience. Michael came there sometimes for physical therapy. I remembered his name from years before, the man who had once been mocked in a corner of our family's gossip. I observed him from afar, careful and not cruel. I wanted to know if the rumors were true and if he had been mistreated. One afternoon, while I was organizing donations, a therapist introduced me to Michael. He was smaller than the pictures had shown, gentle and soft-spoken. His eyes were kind, not defeated. We talked about small things, the weather, music, his love for woodworking. He laughed easily when I told a stupid joke about a broken chair. I did not bring up Clara. I could sense a hardness in him that came not from bitterness, but from the long practice of being overlooked. He did not seem bitter. He seemed tired of being seen only as the man with no legs. I did not plan to become his friend as a weapon. I simply wanted to understand. But the more I talked to him, the more I realized how wrong people had been. Michael was not a burden. He was a man with depth, humor, and a gentle sadness that made you respect him. He spoke of the accident in a simple way, without self-pity. He spoke of the days after the accident when Clara had gone away for long weekends and left him with the nurses. He did not complain with anger. He told it as if telling the facts of the weather. That factual tone cut deeper than any loud accusation would have. As I learned more, I began to see Clara in a harsher light. Her kindness was often a performance. Her charity came with a camera and a caption. The person she showed to the world was carefully built, polished at the seams. Behind that polish was a pattern of small cruelties, a habit of stepping on people to make herself look taller. I felt furious, not because she had more than me, but because she had used someone broken as a prop. I started to weave a gentle campaign of truth. I wrote long, careful messages to people in our family and to a few mutual friends. I did not shout. I described small, verifiable moments. The time Clara laughed when a cousin tripped after too many drinks, the way she corrected teachers publicly to sound clever, the afternoons she left Michael alone while she took expensive vacations. I included names, dates, and simple facts. I asked only one thing: consider the truth before believing the glossy picture. Some people ignored me. Some replied with quick defenses of Clara. But one by one, others came forward. A cousin remembered how Clara had sold an old painting Dad had given her for comfort. A college friend admitted that Clara had texted cruel things in private and then acted surprised when anyone called her out. The small truths gathered like drops of water forming a tide. I also began to help people Clara had pushed aside. I used the small savings I had to pay for one therapy session for an elderly neighbor Clara had mocked. I organized a group of volunteers to help families who could not afford care. My actions were not loud, they were quietly useful. People began to notice. They saw that I did not post the good deeds with shining captions. I did not need likes. I needed only to do the work. Meanwhile, Clara continued her loud, polished life. She posted pictures that glittered and wrote stories that sounded like fairy tales. But underneath the flash, those closest to her started to notice inconsistencies. A few people who had always trusted her began to ask gentle questions. Why did she not talk about Michael anymore? Why did she avoid family gatherings without explanation? Why did she sometimes look tired in the corners of her pictures? The questions were small, polite probes. They were not accusations, but when enough small questions exist, a pattern becomes visible. One night, at a small gathering in a community center where I was helping, someone I had listened to for months, a woman named Sarah who had been a classmate of Clara, approached me. She had been quiet for years, afraid of the backlash. "I saw your posts," Sarah said in a low voice. "I've been waiting for someone to say what I felt." She handed me a printed screenshot of an old chat Clara had sent to a friend, a private message that made light of someone's disability. It was not illegal, but it was cruel. Sarah was shaking when she handed it to me. She said she wanted to be anonymous. I promised I would respect her wish. I posted the screenshot, but not to shame. I posted it with a note about kindness and how easy it is to hide cruelty behind a smile. I did not name anyone at first. I did not need to. The picture, once seen, changed conversations. People started talking gently about respect and empathy. They shared stories of how they had felt used by someone they thought was a friend. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. Clara reacted publicly with polished hurt. She wrote a post about being misunderstood, about how people with fame are always misread, how online life is full of shadows. Her post gathered sympathy from many. But the cracks were visible to those who had seen enough small truths. When someone close to her, a former friend, publicly disagreed, saying they had been hurt by her mocking words, others began to question the official story. At the same time, something else happened that I did not expect. Michael, who had been quietly rebuilding his life, reached out to me. He had seen some of the conversations and the anonymous posts. He wanted to say thank you for listening to the stories. He did not ask for revenge. He said softly that he wanted to live honestly, without the pressure to be someone he was not. He invited me to see some of his woodworking projects he made in his small workshop at the rehab. I went and I felt respect. He had made a set of small wooden boxes, each one carefully carved, each one holding tiny, precise details you would only notice if you looked closely. He told me that life after the accident taught him to focus on fine things again, patience, small triumphs, steady rhythms. I realized that while Clara had treated Michael as a shorthand for drama, he had learned new ways to be whole. He had not allowed the accident to define the rest of his life. That truth mattered more to me than any public spectacle. I felt a small warmth for him and a complicated sadness for what had been taken from him. As the weeks passed, more people shared their experiences. The story of Clara's cruelty became a quiet, steady murmur rather than a single loud shout. People who had once applauded her began to feel uneasy. They still loved the shiny pictures, but they began to reserve their applause. They reached out to victims she had belittled. A charity she had been associated with reviewed their ties. A hostess who had once booked her for events decided not to. Business people who once found her charming now paused before making deals. Through all of this, I kept myself careful. I never lied. I never manipulated or created falsehoods. My actions were small but consistent, helping those harmed, telling true stories when asked, and showing through my own quiet actions that kindness does not need a camera. People began to compare the two sisters, one who shouted her goodness from the rooftops and one who did it quietly without headlines. Clara felt the change. She called me once, her voice tight with anger. She accused me of ruining her life and of being jealous. I listened and I told her the truth calmly. You hurt people. They remember. You can change or you can keep acting surprised when the truth catches up. She did not want to hear that. She hung up. Her hang-up felt like a small victory, not because I wanted her destroyed, but because I wanted her to know that being cruel had consequences even when you tried to hide them behind wealth. My life did not become perfect. I still worked odd jobs. I still worried about bills, but I felt stronger than I had before. The war I had chosen was not about money or fame. It was about dignity, honesty, and small human decencies. I had intended to show Clara's true face to the world, but along the way I discovered something else. The power of steady kindness and the strength of people who choose to speak softly and act well. The story was not over. Clara was powerful and proud, and she still had allies. I expected the next move to be loud and desperate on her part. I prepared for it. I kept helping others, I continued to collect simple truths, and I stayed connected to Michael and the people whose quiet courage had reopened my heart. The next step would be the hardest, the final push that would force clarity for everyone involved. I was ready. A few weeks passed quietly, but I could feel the storm building again. Clara had always been someone who couldn't accept silence. She needed attention the way some people need air. So when people stopped reacting to her posts the same way, she panicked. Her photos got fewer likes. Her brand partnerships slowed down. The glow around her name began to fade. And then one morning, she made her move. I woke up to dozens of notifications. Clara had posted a long, emotional video on her social media. She sat in her expensive living room, dressed in soft pastels, with tears shining in her eyes. Her voice trembled as she said she had been betrayed by someone she loved deeply. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. She called herself a victim of jealous family members who couldn't stand to see her happy. She spoke like a wounded angel. People began commenting, sending her sympathy, writing words like "stay strong, queen," and "haters will always hate." For a moment, I felt that old heaviness in my chest, that familiar feeling of being misunderstood. I thought maybe I should reply, maybe I should explain again, but then I stopped. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. People who truly saw me knew me. The rest didn't matter. But I did know one thing: lies don't stay beautiful for long. Truth, even when whispered, echoes louder over time. Still, I decided to do one final thing. Not to hurt her, but to end this story properly, with honesty. I wrote a letter. Not online, not for the public. A real letter on paper. I sat by my window that night with only a candle and my thoughts. My hands trembled as I wrote each word. Clara, I'm not your enemy. I never was. I only wanted respect, not money, not fame, not revenge. You took every chance to make me small because you thought being higher made you better. But you were wrong. The way you treat people is how the world will treat you back. You can delete posts, block truth, twist stories, but you can't hide your heart forever. I didn't ruin you. You did that yourself, one cruelty at a time. I hope someday you learn that being kind costs nothing, but saves everything. Elena. I sealed the envelope and sent it to her house. Then I closed my phone for a week. I needed silence. During that time, I went back to volunteering. I spent my evenings at the rehab center, helping with patients, sorting clothes, and writing small motivational notes for them. I felt lighter. Michael started smiling more too. He told me he had started teaching woodworking classes to young people with disabilities. We became close friends, not out of pity, but because we both knew what it felt like to rebuild after being broken. Sometimes we would sit on the bench outside the center and watch the sunset. He'd say, "You know, I don't hate her anymore. I just feel sorry for her." And I realized I didn't hate her either. My revenge was never about destroying her. It was about freeing myself from her shadow. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my aunt. She said Clara had shut down her social accounts. Her sponsors had left her, and her so-called friends had disappeared. Some people had found out she lied in that emotional video. A few old colleagues had leaked screenshots that proved she had planned it. Her image was collapsing piece by piece. I didn't celebrate, I just listened quietly. I felt a strange peace. The truth had finally done what I couldn't. Days passed. Then one evening, Clara showed up at my doorstep. She looked nothing like the glowing woman from the internet. Her face was tired, her eyes swollen, her clothes simple. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. "Elena," she said softly, "can we talk?" I nodded and let her in. She stood in the small living room, looking at the few simple things I owned, my old couch, my father's framed photo, and a tiny potted plant by the window. There was silence between us, thick and heavy. Then she broke down. "I lost everything," she whispered. "Everyone left. They said I lied, they called me fake. Maybe I am, but I never thought it would all turn against me this way." Tears streamed down her face. For the first time in years, I saw not the proud woman who mocked me, but the scared little sister I grew up with. I didn't say anything. I just sat beside her. She cried for a long time, not graceful tears for a camera, but real ones, the kind that shake your body. After a while, she looked at me and said, "I'm sorry." That was it, 2 words, but they felt like the heaviest words she had ever spoken. I didn't forgive her right away. Forgiveness is not magic, it's work. But I told her something honest. "I don't want to see you fall, Clara. I just wanted you to see me, to see the people you hurt, to know that love is not something you can buy or fake. You can start again, but only if you mean it." She nodded slowly. There was no argument left in her. She just whispered, "I'll try." That night after she left, I stood by my window again. The city lights blinked far away, and for the first time in a long while, my heart felt light. The revenge that had burned inside me was gone, not because I won, but because I didn't need to fight anymore. A month later, Clara joined a local charity group. She started working with children from poor families. No cameras, no social posts, just quiet, honest work. People didn't trust her at first, but slowly she began to change. Maybe guilt pushed her, maybe growth did, I don't know, but she was trying. Michael kept teaching, and he seemed happier too. He told me one day, "You turned your pain into purpose. That's the only kind of revenge that heals." His words stayed with me. I looked back at everything, the wedding humiliation, the insults, the silence, the war of words, and realized life had brought me through fire to teach me grace. The world may forget your pain, but the universe doesn't. It remembers. It balances. You just have to be patient enough to let it work. Today, I still live simply. I still help at the rehab. Sometimes, Clara visits quietly without makeup or pride. She brings food for the patients and sits beside me. We don't talk about the past anymore. We just sit in silence, 2 sisters, both changed, both scarred, both trying. Maybe that's what real revenge is, not hurting the person who hurt you, but healing so completely that their power over you disappears. Because the best revenge is peace. The end.